Siyabulela nala. Siyabulela ndokose. Sicela umntu oqhuba imoto engu CM 86 TM kune problem ye lights ngathi zi on. CM 86 TM uyacela. Now abantu abamaziyo ukuthi Dumile bawuyazi lento ye love for sport. Kwake kwakho iAfrica Games ezazi lapha eSouth Africa. Ndimbonile uBhuti Mthobi Chamzashi no Mvuzo Mbhebe babe involved kulento no Dumile behambela phezulu besithi this must be a very successful Africa Games. Babe sithi ke bafuna ushiya legacy. Andizoya kwezinye legacies ezashiyekayo ndifuna ucaphula le ndawo. One of the legacies abebefuna uba ibe khona uba onoteksi must benefit from these games. Inhlemos London ndithi ba onoteksi mabatransporte i-athletes from the athletes village to a stadium apho kupractice wakhona. Into enhlemos leyo. Bathi onoteksi iyasinceda uba nisibhatale ngaphambili. Hayi ke bangabantu abagenerous babanike nyana onoteksi imali babhatale onoteksi. I-sports ke se-Africa Games it's individual athletes. Umuntu yi-discus, omnye i-javelin, ufuna upractice. Afike eteksini ngo-10 ngoba i-practice yakhe ingo-11. Ahlale eteksini ulindele iteksi ihambe. Ihlala into enkulu phaa imamele i-radio yayo, iteksi ayihambi. Kukho i-problem ye-language ke ngoku ithepha isuke eMorocco okanye isuke ese-Algeria izama ukuthi iteksi mayihambe. Hayi iteksi ayihambi. Babizwa ke oDumile noBhuti Mthobi mabazolungisa le nto. Bathi konoteksi bayageza aba bantu. Bake bayivaphi iteksi ehamba nabantu ababini. Uyachaza kwelacala uathlete uba ndimoshwa ixesha lam lokupractice. There was a cultural clash. Bacenga ke oDumile bacenga oBhuti Mthobi noMvuzo bade bavunyelwa uba ingahamba iteksi nomuntu omnye ophethe imbokotho. Kumuntu ke dokholo ophethe lando ujula. We are gone, but it was efforts oDumile were involved in. Proud moments of how to marry the informal sometimes sector with some of the national programs. So ngizawucela ke uWebster into kaMfebe ukuthaza ngaphambili, former head of sports, has been involved in the sports movement nathi for a long time, aze naye azodivandla ngokusebenza nomntana kaMatheza.
Program Director, Mfundisi Clay Boy, Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches, His Worship Bishop Mpumlwana and Mampumlwana and other church leaders here present, the bereaved family, members of the media, fellow mourners. I carry the burden to say what has to be said here today without fear or favor. Otherwise, if I don't do so, Mateza's spirit will haunt me day and night. It is indeed a distinct honor to speak as former head of SABC Sport and colleague about Mateza, who had a larger-than-life personality in the sport broadcasting fraternity. Let me at the very outset relay my heartfelt condolences to the whole Mateza family, and in particular his dearest wife, Sisxoliswa, and beloved daughters, Nandi and Tutula, and Tunkabi's many friends and ex-colleagues such as Mandi Satiti, Pat Komafana, Lita Nkombisa, Butiki Nkonki, Mongez Nsokolo, Vuisile Voi, Mona Vanga, Happy Mabuya, Nokufika Menyagani, Dixie Ngula, Lunga Williams, Sonwabile Ndamase, Bobby Likilili, Mtobi Jamzashe, Ngonde Balfo, just to mention a few. Sisxoliswa, xola nabantwana bakho akuhlanga lungehlanga naleya kubuya idlule. Uras Mateza unkabi Phesheya Phala chap, as he was popularly and affectionately known to some of us, was a true son of the soil, husband, father, brother, friend, colleague, prolific reader and researcher, mobile library, historian par excellence, linguist, intellectual, passionate and compassionate, sport multi-award icon, visionary, mentor, patriot, consummate broadcaster and professional, whose versatility and wide knowledge in broadcasting a multiplicity of sporting codes was simply impeccable, unparalleled and unrivaled. I swear to Lord Almighty that one would run out of adjectives to do justice in defining the character this wonderful soul was, whose body now lies here before us, cold, motionless, and speechless. Yet the sound of his unique voice silently echoes in our ears. As a doyen of boxing in South Africa, there is no doubt boxing was his major love. Dumile was, among other things, synonymous with boxing itself, which unfortunately, in terms of broadcasting exposure and sponsorship, still remains the poor cousin of sporting codes like rugby, cricket, and soccer, despite it being a sporting code which is very popular among certain sections of the previously disadvantaged communities. And as a result, many boxing promoters have perished and some are hardly coping, as their survival is directly linked to broadcasting rights and sponsorships. Many may the ultimate untimely death of Mateza give birth to the timely rise of boxing with adequate exposure and requisite investment. Unkabi was indeed a multi-talented individual whose distinctive voice echoed melodiously in the TV rooms of most homes, gluing to the TV screens both ardent and nonchalant sport fans alike for over 2 decades. He had this magic voice and infectious smile that aroused interest even in the most boring game, as he literally infused life into every game. If you took your remote control searching for good programs, you would not simply skip his program because you would be stuck with him for an unplanned considerable amount of time watching. I think that sponsors and advertisers alike derived a good return on their investment whenever Dumile took to the microphone, as they needed eyes and ears for their brand exposure. Most importantly, more public interest due to adequate media exposure of any sporting code creates a fertile environment as a basis for sport development, especially those codes that were not accessible to the previously disadvantaged individual. Dumile has therefore contributed enormously to the development and growth of sport in our country, and sporting clubs and associations alike will surely bear testimony to that fact. Unkabi, Phesheya Phala, Uras Mateza, Lachep, Aikaluk. We kept a sporadic contact beyond the SABC gates, as we occasionally met at an African cuisine restaurant called Za Africa, and he would reminisce about the days when we were together, and I would engage him about constitutional issues, as he was then presenting an SABC program called Rights and Recourse. Rights and Recourse program was driven by his undying passion and resolve to pursue social justice for all in our country. The discussions at this restaurant was so robust, as if we were on live television. And I used to retort that he must not forget that I was one of those who actively participated in the development of the Bill of Rights in Chapter 2 of the Constitution as a then Member of Parliament and Constitutional Assembly from 1994 until the Constitution was finalized and adopted in 1994. But quintessential Mateza would never relent in any debate with anyone, no matter what they are standing in society. Even before I joined SABC in 2005, when I was MEC responsible for sport in the Free State from 1997 to 2004, he was always one of my most admired sport broadcasters. When we occasionally met, I was left with no doubt that the man truly loved, lived, and ate sport as it was deeply engraved in his personal DNA. At some of my few encounters with him at South Africa, he was well known to sporadically belt out songs that made him an instant hit as he sang along karaoke style, leaving patrons completely spellbound. Some women would say of his unique voice, "Can you imagine having a man with such a sexy voice singing for you while taking a shower? It would mean only gratification of the highest order, as all stresses will melt away in the warmth of his sweet tenor voice." Unkabi would quickly burst their bubble by saying, "Hayi kaloku, ndinonkosikazi mna, yekani ukubawela izinto ezikude kunani." Indeed, the man was humorous as he was multi-talented. He was very meticulous and even in the correct pronunciation of certain words. For an example, he, among other things, lamented about the incorrect pronunciation of Orlando Pirates and PSL chair. He would yell, "For heaven's sake, he is not Ivan, he is Ervin Khoza. He is Ervin Khoza. The IR is pronounced ER, Ervin Khoza, not Ivan." Awunkabi phesheya pha, hayi kaloku, much as we shall miss you, your distinctive voice on earth, it shall receive a most favorable ear from the Most High in the heavens above the African sky. In this world we live in, many people are hearing, but very few are listening. Merriam-Webster dictionary defines hearing as the process, function, or power of perceiving sound, specifically the special sense by which noises and tones are received as stimuli. But listening, on the other hand, means to pay attention to sound, to hear something with thoughtful attention, and to give consideration. Your proposal, Ngabi, in my time as SABC Sport, to impart knowledge to others, especially empowering young on-air talent with broadcasting skills, was heard but not listened to by the erstwhile bosses above my pay grade. Having personally given you a 12-month trial period, at the end of which your thoughtful project was aborted by thoughtless and thankless people in the higher echelons of the SABC. Mona no Bob Wayavanga would testify to this. Unkabi, among other things, was later assigned to do research on the Soccer World Cup teams that were to descend on South African soil, a job he did with absolute distinction. And when I later became SABC 2010 head, before I left the toxic environment at the SABC on the eve of the Soccer World Cup, but I'm glad that the SABC strategy that I developed with the invaluable inputs of the likes of Dumile Mateza and other colleagues at SABC Sport was later implemented and won the SABC and FIFA Award in Broadcasting Excellence. When I was head of sport, I introduced and enforced a wholesale transformation in changes by appointing 4 women as sport analysts in male-dominated sporting codes, such as male soccer teams, motorsport, amid resistance. Strangely, from some women who argued that women were not yet ready. Mateza was one of those who I approached for support and wise counsel as protests against my transformation efforts were escalated to higher authorities. And Kabi would say to me, "Tell them, Fogamfebe, they are mad, baphamben." Because, for an example, in boxing in East London and Port Elizabeth, we had successful and feisty female boxing promoter, Mbali Zansi, with a distinguished career, and the world never fell apart, and it will never fall apart by giving equal opportunities to women. Instead, it will become a better place. It is out of that process that Gloria Brown, Desiree Ellis became the first female touchline expert in the history of PSL games, to the handsome but skeptical surprise of many fans. Thanks Nkabi for being one of those who stood firmly by my side in my efforts to mainstream gender equality in sport broadcasting of male-dominated sports, to give access to women as worthy and equal analysts among their male counterparts. Today, Desiree Ellis is a successful head coach of Banyana Banyana, and how I wish someday she becomes the head coach of Bafana Bafana. Maybe we shall qualify for top places in continental and world tournaments. The perennial problems typically experienced by the public broadcaster will never end until the current leadership at all levels truly continues to embrace the fundamental ethos of their tagline, independent and impartial. Great taglines and slogans can only derive true meaning when they are faithfully practiced. Freedom of the press and freedom of expression are the holy grail without which no democracy can thrive and survive, no matter how benevolent those in positions of power can be. That even if they can pay journalists tenfold their expectations, taking away these freedoms from them shall be tantamount to committing intellectual and journalistic genocide, which is akin to apartheid-style sponsorship. And Nkabi was one of those who refused to be bullied, hence his resilience and independence, and him a few friends from some in the higher echelons of the SABC. The SABC is not independent of us as the people, as the citizen. It is a mirror of a multiplicity of authentic voices and lived experiences of ordinary people, narrated with absolute impartiality, with a view to educating, informing, and entertaining the nation, thereby leaving the choice to them to digest and formulate their own independent opinions. It fosters social cohesion with a daily reach of over 30 million people, and therefore the content to be consumed by such a huge audience must be devoid of any impurities. The struggle for democracy has always been and will always be about the restoration of human dignity, the fundamental ingredient of which is one's voice to be heard, the freedom of expression of all citizens without fear or favor. We therefore need a public broadcaster that continues to embrace these values internally and publicly in order to deepen the human rights culture in our country. The SABC has never been lacking of skilled personnel like Dumile Mateza, but they must be given the requisite space to practice their craft without interference, especially editorial independence, subject only to fair policies, broadcasting code of conduct, and the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And those who are more talented and experienced must be encouraged and accordingly rewarded to mentor others, just like what Dumile Mateza envisioned. I suggest that SABC must inter alia consider the possibility of establishing an on-air talent broadcasting academy to honor the memory of Dumile Mateza's vision, which he never fully realized. This will help augment the formal academic qualifications with practical hands-on experience of new entrants, utilizing inter alia current and former revered, tried and tested broadcasters. I also think that it is time and never too late for any university to posthumously award Dumile an honorary doctorate in journalism in recognition of his sterling contribution to the development and growth of sport in our country and beyond. Similarly, he is worthy of being considered as a recipient of national orders from President Cyril Ramaphosa in our country. And this very funeral should have been designated a state funeral. What an unfortunate oversight. I regularly meet former SABC employees who, like Dumile Mateza, feel that they have accumulated the requisite experience to contribute to the positive growth of the SABC, but were marginalized for exercising their constitutional right to freedom of expression in a career that in fact that in fact requires such independent thinkers so that citizens are not fed propaganda of the most powerful in society. In this regard, I call on the SABC leadership to open the gates and the space for the SABC to truly become one of the top public, not state broadcasters in the world. Many talented and experienced individuals are here waiting in the wings in order to contribute in one way or the other for the rebirth of the African public broadcasting giant. To SABC leadership, I say John Vulligate. The SABC has the potential to become the top public broadcaster in the world, and all we need is consistent conscious leadership at various levels, operational, board, executive, parliamentary oversight, and keeping a very, very safe social distance from editorial decision so as not to infect content with the toxic virus of undue influence. In honor of Dumile Mateza and other great SABC journalists, deceased and alive, employed and unemployed, let us all as a nation cajole and even pressure SABC as a public broadcaster to rise up to the challenge and maintain the standard of being one of the most trusted sources of information, education, and entertainment in our country. Those families whose departed loved ones are still owed their monies by the SABC, like Mvuzo Mbebe and Dumile Mateza and others, must without any further delays be given what is legitimately theirs and due to them. A practice of Ubuntu by the SABC as a public broadcaster will have positive spin-off for public education, as it will teach both young and mature citizens the values of Ubuntu and empathy towards others. And this will help position the SABC not as a slaughterhouse of people's careers, but as an incubator of excellence, impartiality, independence, and Ubuntu, and being regarded as the employer of choice by independent thinkers, because it impacts over 30 million South Africans on a daily basis. Lala ngoxolo nala, lala ngoxolo nkabi, phesheya pha, khangala. Usibulisele kubo abo besiqalenga nabo basishiyayo kulo mhlaba umagada ahlabayo. Abafana noMvuzo Mbebe, oDan Sithedi, oMzima Simqebisi, oDavid Kekana, nabanye. Makube Khosi, makube hele, mawudede ubumnyama kuvele kukhanya.
Uthe xa ungena mntakamfebe wathi unamandate ze ndokunika ixeshana imandate ke ubuthunywe nguDumile. Anybody who has known uDumile would have known that these are the things that he has felt throughout the years. Abanendlebe mabeve. Uthi ke mntakamfebe sicela inkokheli ezithanda isizwe, hayi ezithanda izisu. Phathwa abantu ngendlela ukuphuhlisa uMzantsi Afrika nokuphuhlisa i-Broadcasting Corporation yethu. La moto beke ndathetha ngayo mhlambi umuntu ebeyibolekiwe ngoba inumber plate akayazi right kuthiwa i-black Porsche masiphinde simbulele uMr Webster umntakamfeba. Sidlula ke ngoku sizawuthetha nefamily yonala yoMatheza isithethi uNomathemba Madlwabinga, Cela umama uNomathemba Madlwabinga eze ngaphambili azothethela ondokose onala.
Ndizibulisele abafundisi bonke abakhoyo apha ngaphakathi. Ndizibulisele kubefundisikazi. Ndizibulisele komama notata. Ndizibulisele kumlisela nomthinjana. Ndizibulisele kwifamily yasekhaya. KwaMateza onalo ndokose. Mna ndinguNomathemba Madlwabinga langa. Ndingumzukulwana kwaMateza, ndingukhazini kaBudumile. uBudumile ukhulela kwindawo encinci kuthiwa yiCarrieto. uBudumile ukhula eCarrieto, ukhula kunye nabantu abaninzi kokwabo. uBudumile ekukhuleni kwakhe ukhule waziqaqambisa, wazibonakalisa okokuba yena unemission anayo. uBudumile uyiqale ukuyisebenzisa ingqondo yakhe at a very early stage of his life. Eqala ukusebenzisa ingqondo yakhe nje at an early stage of his life, uyisebenzisa enganidi support samntu, ezihambela yedwa. Ndikhumbula sisakhula uDumile, thina sithanda uphuma esikolweni, nandandihlala eHumansdorp, yena ehlala eCarrieto. uDumile xa vela esikolweni eCarrieto, zazibakho imini ndandibakhona ngazo eCarrieto. Wayesithi uDumile xa vela esikolweni, abanye abantwana baphuma esikolweni bahambe bayodlala, uDumile wayethatha into zakhe anxibe ahambe aye kwamlungu uyolungiselela ubomi bakhe at a very early stage of his life. Kwathi ke apha ekukhuleni kwakhe uDumile, ndaqaphela nto apha kuDumile. Ndaqaphela into kokuba uDumile ungumntu ozithandayo. uBudumile njengoba ezithanda nje, ndiqaphela into yokokuba uBudumile nje behamba nje, apha hamba khona uhamba ene-Colgate, i-toothpaste. ene-toothpaste kunye ne-brush epokothweni yakhe. Now uBudumile xa everywhere apho agqiba utya khona, uyabona uDumile kwakungekho zi-bathrooms mos emakhayeni wethu then. Then ubhuti uzothatha iglass okanye ikopi akha amanzi aphume phandle. Ngenye imini xa yenza le nto ndamlandela. Ndamela qelele kuye ndafumanisa into yoba ukhupha i-toothpaste epokothweni nebrush yakhe. Ndasondela andayibona that day le toothpaste yakhe ayikhuphayo. Because kaloku ndamonqana noyamonqana because ubhudumile uyaxhaya. And uyamswitcha umntu sana aka-compromise ngaloo nto. Then ndaphinda ndafumana ithuba loba ndiphinde ndibe close kuye xa ikhupha ke ngoku le toothpaste. Xa ikhupha le toothpaste yakhe ndafumanisa into yoba yi-method and P le ayithanda kangaka. Then nam ndangangumntu ke ngoku othanda i-method and P. But what is remarkable in this is that njengokuba uDumile enale toothpaste njenale brush, sasingazi thina into yokokuba ulungiselela into yokokuba ezayohleka kwi-nations. Little that we know that uDumile ulungiselela ikamva lakhe. Elilungiselela nje elikamva lakhe ulilungiselela kungekho mntu advisayo, i-advisor yakhe nguye. Apha ekukhuleni ke kwakhe uDumile wakhula wayofunda ke ubhuDumile wayofunda eloyiso. Wafika eloyiso hayi wabalasela eloyiso. Waphinda wayotsho eNewell, wafika eNewell naphaya wabalasela wayongena kwi-Matthew Singers akho nto ubhuDumile angazibandakanyanga kuyo ezawumbangela into yokokuba igama eli lakhe livele apha ebomini bakhe. Then uthe ke ubhuDumile awube epasile eNewell. Wabuya ubhuDumile wezekhaya waqeshwa wayitishara. Apha ekuqeshweni kwakhe ukuba yitishara kwakhe hayi ke kulapho ke ngoku walephuza waphuma sambona uyavela. Wawusithi nokokuba uyathetha ummamela nendlela othetha ngayo. Once ukhe wathetha wabhuda nje Nomathemba, you don't pronounce that like that. You don't say ekeredo Nomathemba, this is carido. So ubhuDumile ke ngoku wanifundisa nami into yokokuba funeka ndirespecte even indlela endipronounsa ngayo. Ngekuba bendifuna unaba qha ke ndibetha lixesha. Ndifuna ukuthi ke kwifamily xa njika ndifuna uthi kwifamily yakwaMatheza nanku ubhuDumile lele khona. ubhuDumile akasiphoxanga thina. ubhuDumile wahambile amazwe. ubhuDumile uzenzela izihlobo ezilapha zizihlobo zakhe ezinye sifika phaya endlini yakhe izizihlobo ezingaphezulu nakunathi because of uDumile ebengumntu wabantu. And ubhuDumile akayenzanga into yokokuba athi xa fika ezizweni afike ubhuDumile ayilahle le family yaseKarieto ngenxa yoba eseRhawutini. ubhuDumile wawusithi ukuba wena umfowunele, that was remarkable. ubhuDumile ubumfowunele awamfumane efowunini. ubhuDumile akasoze iphele 3 days ubhuDumile engaphindanga wabuyela kuwe akubuze Nomathemba, you phoned me bintoni. Uchaze loo nto athi don't worry zabe ndilapha. All the time ubhuDumile will be there amongst the family. And ukufika kwakhe nokokuba izinto bezibhatyazeka uqonda into yoba heyi sibamba siyeka kodwa njenge-anointing yofika kwakhe kufika kulunge zonke izinto zihambe ngendlela. Ndithi kuye ngenye imini ndithi mani bekumele uba wena ungumfundisi ngokwe-profession. Athi kum, Nomathemba yayazi indlela endiyithanda ngayo i-boxing. Do you know how much I love boxing? Ndithi ke mna ke bhuti ungakungena eringini kuyobethwa nje nawe okanye ubethe nawe. So zizinqoko esasizinqokola noBhudumile ngeli xesha egula uBhudumile.